What's up, everybody? Chris Pennell here. We're going over my wide receiver tier rankings for week 7 of the fantasy football season. If you do end up enjoying today's video, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you just want to call me ugly, make sure you leave a comment. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. All right, so let's get right into it here. We're going to start with our S tier, the guys you are starting no matter what, no matter the matchup. They're just that good. And the number one spot, I don't think it's to a surprise of anybody. And it's really easy these days because Justin Jefferson, unfortunately, is no longer with us. So he's kind of the lone wolf. But it's Tyreek Hill. The guy just gets it done every single week. 9 targets per game, 135 receiving yards. The pace that he is on right now is just incredible. A touchdown per game, a 30% target share, nearly a 50% market share of the team's air yards. And just to put it in perspective, how good Tyreek Hill has been, and really how efficient he's been as well. We are talking 0.98 fantasy points per route ran this year, so nearly 1 point per route. The next best on the players that I am looking at right now is Cooper Kupp, and that is with a 2-game sample size, so obviously it's a bit skewed, and he's played very well, and that's at 0.69 fantasy points per route ran. So that's how much better he's been than the next best guy, and that's dealing with a small sample size. Stefon Diggs, who has a big sample size this year, who we all know is an elite level wide receiver, and we're going to see him in the S tier here. He's at 0.67 fantasy points per route ran. So it's just been incredible how good Tyreek Hill has been. 0.35 targets per route, 5.02 yards per route ran as well. It's incredible. I know we're starting him no matter what, but just give you guys an idea of how much Tyreek Hill is dominating defenses right now. Plus, good matchup versus Philadelphia. It's a primetime game. Going to be high scoring, highest total of the week. I mean, I would expect fireworks from this game in general and Tyreek Hill specifically. Next guy we just talked about him a little bit, but Cooper Kupp. It's been 2 weeks since he's been back, and he picked up right where he left off. I know a lot of people were kind of worried that Puka was going to be the new alpha dog in this offense. Maybe Cooper Kupp's injury was more severe than we thought, and he was going to be hindered. Well, I would say you're 0 for 2 right there because Cooper Kupp looks incredible. 133 yards per game, 11 targets, half a touchdown, 42% target share, a near 100% weighted opportunity share, and a 52% market share of the team's air yards. Dealing with very small sample sizes there, so I would expect those numbers to go down, but the targets won't go away. We're going to see double digits probably every single week for Cooper Kupp. And with Matthew Stafford, the ball goes 2 places. It goes to Cooper, and it goes to Puka. And we're going to talk about Puka here soon. I still think he's an elite option, but obviously Cooper Kupp does take away some of his upside. But the Steelers have not been good defensively versus wide receivers this season, actually allowing the 4th most points per game at 44.8. Now, that's obviously not to the specific wide receiver one, but to wide receivers in general, but that's still a lot. And over 200 receiving yards specifically to wide receivers, so fire up Cooper Kupp with confidence. Another guy that's just a target hog, Keenan Allen. If you guys get a common theme here, the more volume you get, the more likely you're going to be higher ranked, and just the more opportunity you have to score points. But Keenan Allen, without Mike Williams, he's a cheat code. He's going to get a ton of targets every single week. Now, I don't love that Austin Ekeler is back because it takes just some of those short targets away, just because and then he's the safety valve, and Austin Ekeler can be a check down guy. But, I mean, we're still going to get elite level volume here. He's averaging right around 11 targets per game, 30% target share. And this is an offense that throws the ball a ton, over 100 receiving yards per game. And he finds the end zone quite often. And this is another game that has the potential to be very high scoring versus Kansas City. And it should be a nice positive game script. I wish they were at home. They're on the road, but they are 5.5 point dogs here. Should be trailing. And while the KC defense has been good this year, allowing the 7th fewest points per game, Keenan Allen is a dog, and he should still eat. And our last guy in the S tier, I know we usually try to get 5, but there is a bit of a drop off, just a bit. But last man standing in our S tier, it's got to be Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, one of the most consistent wide receivers week in, week out of the entire season. And just like everybody else we talked about, pretty much seeing double-digit targets per game at 10.5, over 8 catches per game, 103 receiving yards, 33% target share. And when the Bills throw the ball, it is pretty much going to Stefon Diggs, and he has massive upside every single week. Matchup versus New England, while they have been a pretty poor team so far this year, especially offensively, their defense hasn't been that bad, and they're just slow, gross, grinding games, but they're still 14th versus receivers, and they could be first. I don't care. Stefon Diggs would still be in the S tier for me. Moving down to the A tier, I wanted to put him in the S tier, but we had to have a drop off, and I think the A tier has like 4 to 5 guys that are all right there in value. But the first one for me, it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, returned from injury last week versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You might have been a little bit worried about starting him just because it's his first game back, but there was no issue whatsoever. He ate, and he ate, and he ate against that Buccaneers defense, and he's just been super consistent. He is kind of like Keenan Allen, honestly, where he plays a lot in the slot, and while he doesn't really go down the field too much, he can make those big splash plays, but the points just add up in PPR formats. So if you are in a PPR league, if you're in a standard league, it makes a little bit of a difference. But for those of you in PPR, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he gets those points added up in a hurry over the course of a game. But talking just about 8 catches per game, 91 receiving yards, close to a 30% target share. He is Jared Goff's de facto numero uno option. I wish we were at home in the Dome. We're on the road in Baltimore, but it is what it is. We can't get everything to go our way. Next up in the A tier, we got Davante Adams. Now, the quarterback situation for the Las Vegas Raiders this week is going to be a bit interesting because Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe, just got an alert. It's Wednesday morning, or Wednesday afternoon, I should say, well, morning over at Vegas. Yeah, he is not practicing today. Now, Wednesday, not a big deal. We know a lot of guys don't practice on Wednesday. Thursday, Friday will be more telling. I'm hoping he plays. Not that Jimmy G is the most elite talent quarterback ever, but he knows how to get the ball to Jacoby Myers and Davante Adams, and he can do it pretty good. It's a good matchup versus Chicago Bears. But no matter who is the quarterback, Adams belongs in this A tier because they got to throw the ball somewhere, and Adams is obviously a dog. About 10 targets per game, 30% target share. You can almost say this for everybody we talked about so far. Like, if you're an elite level wide receiver, you're getting roughly 10 targets per game. You're owning a 30% target share. You're getting a decent market share of the team's air yards. That's just what you do. Up next for me is Puka. I know people are kind of speaking on his demise after pretty much his first bad game of the season. And obviously it's easy to say, well, it's because Cooper Kupp is back. He's taking all the targets. Keep in mind, the Rams did not have to throw the ball in the second half. Like, they just ran the ball with Kyren Williams. Because I know going into that half, I'm a Kyren Williams owner, and I own Puka, and I own Cooper Kupp. I'm pretty much all in on that Rams offense, which, not too bad, I don't think. That's a good thing to be, although I did lose Kyren Williams, unfortunately. But Kyren Williams had like 0.4 fantasy points going into the second half, and then he ends the game with close to 30, like just went absolutely off. So don't be too worried about what we saw with Puka last week. Plus, he had an end zone target, and he ended up dropping it. Bad pass, bad count. I'd say he kind of dropped it, really. But I think Puka still belongs in this A tier because the ball is going 2 places in this offense. It's going to Puka. It's going to Cooper Kupp. My projections for Puka this week are a healthy 25.1% target share. That's 9.1 targets, 6.4 catches, 79 receiving yards, 0.3 receiving touchdown, which equates to 16.2 fantasy points. That's not an A-tier wide receiver. I'm not sure what is. And like I said, very good matchup versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Rolling into the next one, we got Big Mike Evans here with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. Baker really looks one way, and it's Mike Evans' way. Chris Godwin will get some targets, although we didn't really see anything last week until the very end versus the Detroit Lions. But Mike Evans is the main guy in this offense that Baker does look to get the ball to. Now, he's averaging less than 5 catches per game, but he can get those big chunk plays. Nearly 40% market share of the team's air yards this season with a 13.7 ADOT, close to 80 receiving yards per game, and just about 8 targets. But he can be a touchdown monster, averaging right around 0.6 receiving touchdowns, which that's obviously not one like Tyreek Hill, but that's still pretty solid. Like, that's not too far off of guys like Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, on par with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Davante Adams. So I do think Mike Evans belongs in the A tier here. I wouldn't say it's the best matchup in the world versus the Atlanta Falcons. They have been pretty stingy versus receivers this season, and in general, their defense has been pretty good, allowing the 5th fewest points per game. So I don't think it's going to be a ceiling game from Evans, but the Buccaneers got to get the ball somewhere, and Rachaad White's not very good, and it's pretty much just going to be Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So I think he does belong in this A tier. And Brandon Ayuk here. I know the 49ers offense wasn't amazing last week, but they were facing, historically right now, through the first 6 weeks, or whatever it is, 5 weeks, because they had a bye week, the Browns defense is really good, like historically good. So we'll cut them a pass there. Plus, it was pretty windy, so it's hard to get those down the field throws, which we know Brandon Ayuk has actually been pretty solid at so far this year with his 15.2 ADOT, 53% market share of the team's air yards. We don't know the status of Christian McCaffrey yet. If he happens to be out, it could just lead to the offense throwing the ball a little bit more. And this is a great matchup for Brandon Ayuk. We know the Minnesota Vikings defense is awful versus the pass, and specifically awful versus wide receivers. They're allowing the 3rd most points per game, nearly 200 receiving yards specifically, and 44.9 points. So Ayuk, Debo, we know Debo got shaken up last week. It sounds like he's going to be good to go. If he happened to miss by chance, that would just firmly put Ayuk in the A tier here, but I still think he's an excellent wide receiver 1, low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 option this week. And then to end this tier here, we got to put in one of Tua's pass catchers just because this offense is going to put up points, high-scoring game this week. It's in prime time. One of the higher totals of the week, and we know pretty much the ball is going to Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill, or Jalen Waddle in this offense. Now, I feel like Waddle's been a bit disappointing for fantasy this year, averaging under 60 receiving yards per game and under 5 catches, 23% target share, still nice. Not really getting the ball down the field though. 26% market share of the team's air yards at 9.7 ADOT. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, that's his role. But I mean, if you're going to be the wide receiver 2 in a very prominent role on one of the best offenses in football in a high scoring game and against a team that has struggled versus wide receivers this season, I still think you belong in the A tier. And kicking off our B tier, we have Jakobi Meyers. Now, again, I actually think he could be in the A tier if we had confirmation that Jimmy G was playing or not, because, I mean, I know he's not like a big household name or anything, but Jakobi Meyers has actually been very good so far this year. Posted 9 targets per game, 6 catches, 0.8 touchdowns, 27% target share. Like, this has everything you want out of a wide receiver that's not like an obvious stud. So a bit underrated in my opinion. I'm going to throw him in here in the B tier. If Jimmy G plays, I think he's very much so on the fringe of the A tier because he's very consistent, and he also has pretty similar upside to Davante Adams, even though it doesn't feel like it. So Myers makes it there. Good matchup for Chicago, but I do worry about this game just being very, very sloppy. 37.5 point over under, which I believe is the lowest of any game this week. 20.25 implied team total for the Raiders. Baden O'Connell is the quarterback. It's not like the biggest downgrade in the world, but I would prefer just regular old pocket passer Jimmy G, who knows how to get the ball to the 2 main options. Next up, we have Michael Pittman, another guy that's not dealing with the best quarterback situation, although I kind of prefer Gardner Minshew for Michael Pittman over Anthony Richardson, just because Richardson's more of a guy that's going to run the football, and while Minshew's not the absolute best quarterback in the world, I mean, Michael Pittman should still get fed the rock. He's getting 9.5 targets per game, plus 7 catches, 27% target share this season, just under 70 yards. But the matchup, that is the main concern here. The Cleveland Browns, they are really, really stingy. They're actually allowing the fewest points per game to the wide receiver position this season. But, I mean, the Colts have to move the ball somehow. They're not just going to get 0 yards, and they're going to have to get the ball to somebody, and that somebody is going to be either the running backs, although they're probably going to struggle to run a little bit. And then we have Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. And Michael Pittman, obviously the number 1 option here. DJ Moore, another guy with a tricky quarterback situation. Although Justin Fields is his normal quarterback. Is Justin Fields the best quarterback in the world? No. Is he the greatest passer in the world? Obviously no. So I'm not sure it's the biggest downgrade in the world, at least passing wise for the Bears. Obviously Justin Fields can run and he's fun for fantasy purposes, but let's not act like he's been the greatest quarterback in the world either. And DJ Moore in this offense, I mean, it's skewed a bit after he had that 3 touchdown game, or was it a 4 touchdown game? It was at least 3 on Thursday night versus the Washington Commanders. But 0.83 touchdowns per game, 28% target share, 41% market share of the team's air yards, close to 100 yards per game. Very low total for the over-under and very low implied team total as well. So I wouldn't expect a ton here, but with the volume he gets in the offense, hopefully Tyson can get the ball his way, but I'm not going to be super excited about it. But still, when you're a wide receiver 1 in an offense, you still got to be pretty high up in the rankings. Up next, we have Chris Godwin, pretty much the wide receiver 2 in this offense, although target-wise, it's not too far off. He just kind of lacks that big play upside because he's used more so in short-yarded situations. 10.3 ADOT compared to Mike Evans, who is currently sitting at a 13.7. So it's not too far off, but we do know Chris Godwin's more of the safety valve, but he does present upside himself. And he's also sporting a 24% target share this year. Has not gotten to the end zone, but I mean, he just still gets enough volume to make him fantasy relevant. Plus, we know he's a pretty good, talented wide receiver as well. Christian Kirk, who besides 1 game this year, and it was week 1 versus the Colts, he's been heavily involved in this offense, and Calvin Ridley has definitely taken a slide. But Kirk's been a model of consistency. He's seeing just close to 8 targets per game on a 23% target share. Matchup versus New Orleans is not my favorite, and Trevor Lawrence is still a question mark. If Trevor Lawrence happens to be out, I would say we could probably slide Christian Kirk down the rankings a little bit, but it sounds like Lawrence will play, and if he does, well, we know he can trust Christian Kirk. Chris Olave up next on the opposite side of this game. Unfortunate for Chris Olave so far this season. I think we all had higher expectations so far. I think a lot of it's to blame with Derek Carr, but he's still seeing volume, 9 targets per game. He's still an air yards darling. He's at 814, which is actually more than Tyreek Hill so far this season. 16.2 ADOT. The matchup versus Jacksonville is pretty good. They're bottom half in the league versus quarterbacks and wide receivers, so I'm fine with Olave. Hopefully he can break back out at some point because we know the talent's there. He's one of the best wide receivers in football. It's just a matter of quarterback play really for him. And then Marquise Brown, another guy that I think is pretty underrated so far this year. And if you need a wide receiver and you can get him cheap, I wouldn't mind trading for Marquise Brown. He gets plenty of volume in this offense, just under a 30% target share, 29.99, 75% weighted opportunity share, a 44% market share of the team's air yards, and 12.6 ADOT. And he gets a great matchup this week versus the Seattle Seahawks, who are currently dead last versus wide receivers, allowing just under 50 points per game, 204 receiving yards, and 1.4 receiving touchdowns. I like this game in general this week, and I do expect Arizona to have to play some catch up as they are 7.5 point dogs on the road. So this should be a really nice game script for Marquise Brown. And then on the flip side of this game, we have DK Metcalf, who hasn't really had big explosion games this year. Did leave briefly last week with a hip issue, ended up coming back. Still double-digit points in every single week this year. But at some point, he's going to pop off, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's this one. Arizona's 26 versus wide receivers, and both him and Tyler Lockett are roughly seeing around 6 to 8 targets per game this year, give or take, and kind of sway each week. But we know the talent with DK Metcalf. We know the upside. Geno Smith hasn't exactly been great this year, but this is definitely a good get-right spot. And if it's not Kenneth Walker doing all the damage, it should be the wide receivers. And we have a super high total here at 26, 7.5 point favorites at home. So I don't mind either Seattle wide receiver, although Tyler Lockett will be a little bit lower down in this list. And really quick, I just realized I saw his picture right in front of me. I was like, oh shoot, you should probably be up there by now. But it's AJ Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. He actually slides right behind Amon-Ra St. Brown for me in my rankings. So I'm just going to blame the A. Brown 2 in a row that I see here, and I just glossed right over it. But great spot versus Miami, bottom half in the league versus wide receivers this year. And I just love all of the Eagles this week. Jalen Hurts, super high in my rankings. DeAndre Swift, very high. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, who we're probably just about to talk about here in the B tier, also going to be a very viable option, as well as Dallas Goedert. So I am 100% in on all the Eagles, all the Miami Dolphins this week, so didn't mean to forget about them, but I apologize. And up next, someone we probably didn't expect to have in the B tier after week 1 this year, but Calvin Ridley slides in. Even below Christian Kirk, for me, Christian Kirk's just been a bit more consistent. Calvin Ridley, more up and down. This is not a good matchup versus the New Orleans Saints. And the status of Trevor Lawrence definitely hurts this a little bit. If he's in, obviously I'd feel better about it, but not as high as like Calvin Ridley as I thought I would be at this point of the season. Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson pretty much has 2 guys to get the ball to. It's Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. Zay has been pretty much a model consistency volume-wise this year, close to 8 targets per game on a 30% target share. Not really finding the end zone, but a 23-point implied team total here for the Baltimore Ravens at home, facing the Detroit Lions, who are not exactly the best team versus wide receivers, pretty much mid-pack to below average, currently ranking 19th versus the position. So you have Zay. He's a pretty comfortable start in my opinion. And I promise we're almost done with the B tier. Only got 2 guys left, 2 with some decent names, just circumstances have them somewhat lower. The first guy we have is Devontae Smith. We know the talent is there. We know the upside is there and could easily be higher up in this B tier. Love this game in general. It's just obviously AJ Brown's the alpha dog in this offense. There's just a lot of mouths to feed, but obviously I have no problem at all with Devontae Smith. Close to 23% target share in the season. Should probably expect around 7 targets per game, which is fair. Amari Cooper, he is another guy that could be borderline A tier, very high in the B tier if Deshaun Watson was actually going to play. Last time we saw Deshaun Watson play, Amari Cooper had a massive game. And unfortunately, he's been dealing with Dorian Thompson-Robinson playing quarterback and PJ Walker. And that's about as bad as it can possibly get. So it's only up from here. Watson did not practice on Wednesday, and he himself even said, it could be tomorrow, it could be the next day, it could be the day after that, it could be in 2 weeks. I don't really know when I'm going to be able to come back. So that's always encouraging to hear. But Amari gets a great matchup versus the Colts pass defense. I love playing wide receivers versus them. And even though PJ Walker is hot garbage, Cooper still had a pretty big game last week, and it was a bad matchup and the weather sucked. So you got to give Amari Cooper his credit. He made some really nice catches as well. So while it's not going to be pretty if it's PJ Walker again, the matchup's good enough to where he still belongs in the B tier. I do want to mention a couple of injury situations as of right now. So if you're wondering where Deebo Samuel is, not sure if he's going to play it or not. They play on Monday. They definitely have a chance. He's currently day-to-day. If he does end up playing, he belongs somewhere in this B tier, probably more so on the higher end, but as of right now, I do not know. So I'm just going to throw him in right there. And then we have the Steelers with Deontay Johnson looking like he's going to return, although it's not 100% confirmed yet. But I feel like both him and George Pickens probably belong somewhere in this C tier. They should be playing from behind versus the Rams on the road in the Dome, so you don't have to worry about any weather. So not a great matchup as a receiver versus LA, but they'll be playing from behind. So I think either of these options are fine. If one happened to miss, I think they'd be in that B tier, but it does look like both will end up suiting up. So moving on to the C tier here of the guys I actually have ranked, and Jordan Addison would be up first for me in this C tier. And while it wasn't an explosion game with no Justin Jefferson last week, it wasn't the greatest weather in Chicago anyway. A little bit windy. Still had 5 targets, got into the end zone, but KJ Osborne also had 5 targets. So it's not like we saw a huge uptick in usage. But now that they're back at home, they should be trailing versus the 49ers. And I would imagine he is this team's wide receiver one. He was drafted to be obviously a high talented wide receiver. And I think the upside is certainly there. And we've seen flash plays from him. And when you take Justin Jefferson off the field, it does get more volume dispersed across the entire offense and to a guy like Jordan Addison. But at the same time, it also puts more defensive pressure on them because when you have Justin Jefferson on the field, the best wide receiver in football, you pretty much have to divert most of your attention over there. But the Vikings throw the ball a ton, and if it's a positive game script for the Vikings passing offense, I think Jordan Addison will certainly benefit a bit. And then we have Tyler Lockett, who I believe should be down here somewhere. Throwing him in the C tier, we have his teammate DK Metcalf over in the B tier. I just think he has a little bit more upside, but we know Tyler Lockett also possesses some upside because he always has those random weeks where he'll get 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he goes cold for a few weeks. And versus Arizona, I have a fond memory of him having some pretty decent games versus the Arizona Cardinals, but he too is seeing close to 7 targets per game, 22% target share. Pretty similar numbers to DK Metcalf and close to a 40% market share of the team's air yards as well. So Lockett firmly in play. Also scrolling down here because we have 2 T's in a row. Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. Sam Howell does like to spread the ball around a little bit, which can be a bit annoying. But we do know the number 1 target here is McLaurin. 7 targets per game, 24% target share. Has not really gotten to the end zone, but this is a great matchup versus the New York Giants. They rank 20th versus wide receivers this season. We do have a couple more in the C tier here that will make the cut. And I'll go a little bit less in depth here because, I mean, who really wants to hear about this? But Courtland Sutton, I think he's fine here just against the Denver Broncos. Jordan Love's got to get the ball somewhere. And you got 3 decent options out there. Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, and Jaden Reed. But Watson will be my preferred option there. It's a smaller sample size this season because he has been injured, but is sporting a 43.87% market share on an 18.2 ADOT. So I like the big play upside versus that Denver Broncos defense. They've been worse versus the pass than they have versus the run, but I mean, it's still a beatable defense. Also, Michael Thomas, who has not found the end zone yet this season, but is getting targeted over 7 targets per game, 23% target share, roughly around 50 yards, and it's a good matchup versus Jacksonville. If Chris Olave doesn't get the job done, I think Michael Thomas is in line for a decent game, and if you need to flex him, or if you're in a 2-flex league, I think Michael Thomas is fine. You're not excited about it, but I don't think it's the end of the world either. And we do have one last option for our C tier here, and it's going to be Drake London. Had a decent game last week, which was nice to see. It's just really tough to trust any of the passing attack in this Falcons offense. But on the season, 21% target share, 7 targets per game, only a 26% market share of the team's air yards though, but 4 catches, 54 yards, pretty much right on par with a guy like Michael Thomas. So very similar plays there and decent matchup versus the Commanders. They have definitely not been that great versus the wide receiver position this season, ranking 25th. So I think it's a beatable spot. And if Desmond Ridder can at least get the ball to Pitts and London once again like he did last week, that would be very beneficial to, I think, just about everybody. Courtland Sutton will lead us off with the D tier. Not excited about it, but I don't think Russell Wilson is the worst spot start this week. And Sutton on the season, 6 targets per game. He's always going to be a threat for a touchdown, 22% target share. And it's like the nicest thing I can say, but you're not excited about it. Joshua Palmer, just to get a piece of that Chargers passing offense, wide receiver 2 on this team with no Mike Williams. Quentin Johnson, pretty much an afterthought in this offense right now. So anytime you can get the wide receiver 2 for the Los Angeles Chargers and you can put in your flex spot, I would feel pretty decent about it. And this should be in a pass-heavy game script with them trailing on the road in Arrowhead. Gabe Davis, just a cheap part of that Bills offense. Very, very boom or bust. He's not a consistent player by any means, but we know he's got big play upside. 16.3 ADOT this season with a near 30% market share of the team's air yards and 60 yards per game. But like I said, those numbers can fluctuate week to week by quite a bit. Jerry Jeudy, pretty much in the same ballpark as Courtland Sutton. I wouldn't say there's really too much separating these guys. Also, Josh Downs, who I believe down here. Yeah, that is Josh Downs, I believe. I haven't really seen his face too much, but I'm pretty sure that's who that is. He's actually been not too bad. And if you play DFS like me, he's been pretty cheap for a few weeks now, and he's been a viable punt option. But he's getting close to 6 targets per game and 50 receiving yards. That's pretty on par stats with the other guys we've talked about. So while he's not a household name or anything, I mean, I think he's fine if you're in a pinch. And then Curtis Samuel. Sam Howell will spread the ball around quite a bit. And while he hasn't been amazing, he pretty much catches almost everything gone his way. Just over 5 targets per game, over 4 catches, about 50 receiving yards, 16% target share. I mean, it's not much, but it's honest work. With that being said, guys, that's all I got for today's video. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure you like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions about your start sits at wide receiver, running back, quarterback, or whatever it may be, leave it down below. I'm more than happy to answer you. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.